Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Gentle Power. And we are very excited to have Shawna Samuel with us today.
Welcome.
Welcome. You
Thank you.
cold DM'd us or you reached out to
Well,
us
oh,
via email, but I believe Shawna and Gerta, you're both Wellesley alums.
yes, we're both Wellesley alums. I've mentioned this in previous episodes. Wellesley is super active on some private Facebook groups, and we have seen each other comment there. It's like our own Reddit, like the Wellesley alum community own Reddit, and we really help each other from the most obvious, like career questions and things like that, to the most. Shauna, I don't know if you remember someone's grandma was flying. This was like 10 years ago. Someone's grandma was flying, I think, West Coast to East Coast, got lost, and then some random alum who didn't even know the alum whose grandma was, like, drove several hours to go find the grandma. Do you remember this?
It's just such an amazing group, and
Yeah.
it's that kind of people.
Yeah.
So yes, I was saying earlier, I feel like we know each other, even though we're just meeting, and especially given the topics that you work on and the topics that I work on, there was like a nice little bit of overlap. So it's great to
Yeah.
connect today.
Likewise, would you mind taking us through your background? And of course, we're curious how negotiations fit throughout.
Yeah, of course. So now in my current role, I am an executive coach and I run a firm called the Mental Offload. I like to say I specialize in helping women who are balancing big jobs and small kids. So that is what I do in my day job now. But I also spent about 20 years in corporate America and Europe, mostly in finance and consumer finance. And so we can talk a little bit about my negotiation experience in that. But I like to say I am a very reluctant negotiator. And so I kind of bring that in terms of my negotiating background. I was not one of the kids who loved negotiation or bringing a fight or a good debate. I was definitely more of a people pleaser growing up. I wanted everyone to get along. And so my very first professional role was actually in Washington, D.C. I had diplomacy as part of what I did. And so I would identify a little bit more as a natural diplomat. So when I started my MBA at Yale, we were required to take a negotiations class. And that was my first formal introduction to negotiations. Honestly, I probably wouldn't have taken the class unless I were required to, but there I was, I showed up. And the way it was structured, we had paired negotiations. So we had to sit with a partner each week, do a negotiation, come back to class and debrief. And I remember walking into an early negotiation and I turn up in the meeting room and my partner is sitting there in the room, arms folded like this, saying, "You're late. We had a meeting to meet 30 minutes ago, and I've been sitting here." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." Like, this was a day before smartphones, before, you could kind of
Yeah.
quickly do a text check-in. We had set this up via email. And so I felt terrible. I was like, oh my goodness, I almost never miss a meeting. I'm pride myself on being on time. And here I am, I'm showing up late. And I went through this entire negotiation just half in my head about how horrible I felt about what had happened. And then I get back to my apartment after this, look back at my emails, and I realized, oh no, I was on time.
Wow.
And I realized that I think this person had done that on purpose to try to put me on my back foot going into this negotiation. And I thought, oh shit, I'm a dove surrounded by this sea of sharks. And so I came to negotiation with this mindset of like, I know I need to negotiate, I should negotiate, but it's stressful and people are probably out to try to screw me over. And so that was kind of the mindset that I brought to negotiations and my work until, unfortunately, pretty senior in my professional career. I was at American Express. I took on a big partnerships management role. And I thought, well, I am now responsible for managing billion-dollar partnerships. Most of the time, these are, good working relationships, but there are times where you have differences and need to negotiate. And I wanted to be good at my job. So I was like, I need to get better at this. I need to get comfortable with this. And so that's when I really started learning and getting into negotiations. So I say if I can learn to love negotiations, anyone can.
Thank you for that. So would you say you love it now?
I would say I love it. I'm comfortable with it. And I actually have fun with negotiations more often than not.
Yeah, I love to hear that. And that's funny. I have so many thoughts. I think you and Alex have a lot in common as recovering.
Raising my hand as a natural people pleaser as well.
People pleasers unite.
Yeah. A lot of people come to us just to see how we work and how we help people negotiate, but they still have this misconception that negotiation is combative, or it's these types of tricks. This person trying to psych you out and be like, why were you late? We definitely use psychological tricks, I'm not gonna lie, in how we coach people, but they're not malicious. They are things like I read a study. The reason why I enjoy negotiations because I love behavioral sciences and psychology. And so I read this study where just by using the word because when you ask for something, you dramatically increase your chances of getting what you want. And so things like that, when I edit someone's email, I'm like, oh, it might be good to add a because here and a couple of reasons why you want more money, because studies show that it might increase your chances of getting what you want.
Yeah, and we also coach our clients and often share in our content that to think about negotiations as a game where there are rules and every player who's engaging in the negotiation is playing by some set of rules. So you can either come prepared expecting that there are rules and how to play certain things, or come in thinking that, oh no, this is going to be a really intense conversation or whatnot, right? And so when you were in your negotiations course, your negotiating party, they were clearly playing a tactic to try to defeat off your game when you approach. We also see this a lot in the job offer context, or when we're helping clients negotiate offers. There are so many tactics that recruiters and employers are using, and they're all designed to essentially discourage candidates from negotiating, or for them to just accept as soon as they can, so then the employers can move on to filling the other roles. And so some recruiters will be very aggressive and they'll they'll play hardline tactics. Others may engage with you as if they're your friend and they'll be on texting basis with you. All of these are just rules of the game that we try to educate our clients, and through our content that these are all just things that people are doing. It's not necessarily they are mad at you if they're getting aggressive and whatnot.
Yeah. And I think there's also option 3 when you said option 1 is they assume it's a game, like too gamey, and option 2 is I'll just have a conversation. Option 3 is like they're like, oh, I'm just going to be transparent. But with job offers, which is one of our main focuses, if you show your hand and if you share your preferred salary or your current salary, you've given away most of your leverage. So you can't just go and be like, I'm just going to be the transparent person here. Well, the other party will not. And so now you've affected your career.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think knowledge is power. So when you know a little bit of the rules of the game, then you can operate strategically within whatever environment you're in.
Right. Absolutely. I was curious because you mentioned you live in France and you've been there for a while. Have you noticed any differences in how people negotiate in the US versus in France?
Absolutely. I think actually moving to France was a little bit liberating for me in terms of negotiation for a really potentially odd reason. And that is, I think the default response in France is no. So, in the US, when you're negotiating, you will get aggressive people from time to time, but I think most people are, they want to please the person on the other side, and you hear a lot of yes or let's see.
Yeah, it's a very service-oriented country and culture. That's a great
Yes.
point.
Right. So, like, even if a small thing, like you're trying to return an item at the store, the principle is the customer is always right. And if you go in and you have a complaint or you have a problem, you're probably going to get someone on the other side who's going to work with you. This was definitely not the case when I moved to France. And so you got used to hearing a lot of no. And I'll be honest, like at the start when I moved here, I found it almost a little bit depressing and hard to deal with because you get used to hearing a lot of no. People don't generally smile on the street. There's more of like a closed facial expression. And so that's how I kind of turned negotiations into a game. It was sort of out of desperation where I was like, and anyone who's ever visited France will probably relate to this. You go to a cafe, your server's not going to probably give you a smile and give you warm service. You might get that like coffee kind of slammed down on the table and like, bill slammed next to it. So I was just trying to figure out, can I make this a game? Like, how can I get a smile out of this person? How can I maybe get some kind of human interaction? Because I so desperately needed it coming from the US. And so I observed French people and how they went about kind of turning those no's into yeses. And so I think a key thing that I saw in a difference here is that people will hear no and they'll just keep going and keep talking. And that was a big learning for me that I've actually taken back into US negotiations because I'm like, if you can just keep the conversation going, that's half the battle.
I love that. Yeah, I'm Albanian. Our first instinct is no. And this is quick tangent. When Alex and I first started dating, and he visited Albania, he was so confused because it's kind of strange. If you say yes, yes, it means no. If you say no, it's a gentle yes. If you say no, no, it's a bit firmer. You have to say like 4 no's for it to be actually no. It's a very confusing culture.
I remember when I first made that observation, I shared that with your aunt.
Yeah, we
and
hadn't realized it.
Yeah, because I noticed that when people said no once, so the way you say no in Albanian is yo. So you would never hear anyone just say yo. You would hear yo yo, like you
Or
would
yo,
hear
yo, yo.
yo 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 yo, right? And I noticed that you really need to reinforce like
Because
yo yo
people
yo.
will keep pushing. That's so funny. And Shawna, what part of the U.S. are you from? I'm curious because Alex is Californian, so extra gentle, I'd like to think.
Extra chill, just go with the flow. Yeah.
So I spent my entire US life in the Northeast, kind of circling around. I would say New York was probably the epicenter, but lived from DC to Boston to New Haven to Princeton, so kind of circling around the Northeast. And so I would say, especially coming out of the finance industry in New York City, there tends to be a slightly harder edge to things sometimes. But there's still, I think, across the Northeast, that sort of veneer of politeness that people are socialized into. So I think you get both components of that. But over the course of my career, I've worked across 20 some markets, and it's fascinating to see the cultural differences across how people in different cultures approach the same conversations. And I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, I've observed that too. Boston versus New York attitudes. So for those who don't know, Wellesley is a women's college that we both went to. And you work, you said, was it primarily with women now?
Exclusively, yes.
Exclusively with women. Have you had any observations around women and negotiations from your experience?
Yeah, I think that when it comes to negotiation, women are often socialized to avoid negotiations. We get a lot of messages that say, don't go too hard, don't ask for too much, be like the team player, be the nice person. And, I think that this can put women at a disadvantage as we go into negotiations. One of the things that I think is tough is that some of the reticence that I think a lot of women have around negotiation is rational. It's well founded. You kind of think about the biases that women tend to face, which are well recorded in research. We know that, there's the assumption that women are weak negotiators, are bad at advocating for themselves. There's a bias that you shouldn't come across as too aggressive, or shouldn't, try to ask for too much for yourself, because all of this sort of violates this idea that women should be nurturing and caring and not ask for too much, kind of violates the gender norms. And so I think that women, for good reason, tend to be a little more skittish about negotiation. And we face different challenges. Like, we have to have a good negotiation strategy, but we also have kind of narrow guardrails to work within to be successful. I kind of think about it like you're driving on a 4-lane highway, but you can only really use 2 of those lanes maybe effectively. And so I think that creates challenges, unique challenges for women as we try to negotiate in the course of our careers and in the household as well.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And then you said there's the other direction, which is what you've observed yourself.
Yeah. When I take a look at negotiation when it comes to women, there is an inner piece of work that I think a lot of us have to do. And again, I'm kind of raising my hand as a people pleaser here. We tend to get the message that if there's conflict or a difference of opinion or difference of perspective, we need to kind of rush in and fix it and mend it. We don't want that conflict hanging out there. And so, people pleaser, like, let me go in, let's let everyone get along, make everybody happy. But I think in negotiations, one of the things that I think helps women be successful is really learning to hold what I call like productive tension. You need to have enough ability to hold tension that, like, you can be okay having a conversation with the other person when you're not quite on the same page yet. And you're okay letting a question hang out there and see how they respond, if they're going to make a concession or kind of come to you. I mean,
I love that. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So I think being able to hold that productive tension is so critical as a skill. And we need to be taught that.
Yeah, and we've said this in past podcasts where silence can be one of your strengths or a tool that you use. So I think a lot of people, especially, and I myself as a natural people pleaser feel this, is when a question is asked or if there is a gap in silence, there's this first instinct to want to fill that gap by saying more. But sometimes saying less or pausing and just letting a question hang can be very useful, because that could potentially have the other side want to fill that gap too, and they may share more info or whatnot. I really like that piece.
Yeah. Or even just asking one more time when you first hear a no. I remember Alex and I, at the beginning of our relationship with the suitcase.
Oh,
can you
right.
tell that story?
Yeah, so we were going on a trip and we were very late to the airport and we had to check a bag, and we had missed the cutoff time before our flight departs where you can check a bag. And so we get there and we went to and our bag was too big to bring as a carry-on. So we went to the check-in desk and they said, sorry, you've missed the cutoff time. You can only check it on the next flight. And my original instinct was I just took the ticket agent at her word and said, oh man, okay, we can't do this. You know what, babe, you go ahead. I'll just catch the next flight and I'll see you at the destination. And then Gerta was like, no, like we can just ask the next person. Yeah. And so we just went down the desks and just kept
the
asking.
Check-in desk. I think we actually we went through.
We tried going through
to the gate.
Yeah. And Gerta was willing to explore every option. For me, the first no I heard, I just accepted. Okay, well, I guess that's that.
And take the next flight.
And it turned out, and this is a travel tip, we finally reached a ticket agent who was willing to send it forward, but most airlines have a policy where as long as you agree that there's a chance that your bag does not reach the destination, the airline is willing to take the risk of just still sending it through. So we still were able to check it.
Yeah.
and the bag arrived,
You didn't
and
have to buy a new flight.
yeah, that was a really big mind blown moment for me. I wanted to circle back
Love.
when you said in France it's very common by default to get a no first, and I loved what you said, which is just you keep going, you keep the conversation going, and that's something we say too. Just having gentle persistence and continuing to ask, as long as you stay very professional, nice, cordial.
Cordial.
It's worth asking. It's worth keeping the conversation going. So in your experience, whether at the cafe or in the clients that you consult, when your clients first hear a no, then what are the ways that you keep going? Do you ask clarifying questions? Do you rephrase what you're asking for in a different way? What are some of those tactics that you have found effective?
I think that both of those are really effective. Asking clarifying questions, I think this is so key. And I think this works well, actually, to help diffuse some of the bias of potentially being seen as coming on too strong. If you're asking questions and doing it respectfully, it gives you more info, you're having a better conversation, and it can diffuse some of that bias. I think the other thing is, there is a certain art, I think, sometimes to reframing what you're asking in a way that helps get results and get people on your side. But one of the things that when I'm working with clients, we're often working on things like getting promoted to the next level within their job, or conversely, negotiating your priorities. If you're doing the job of 3 people and you need to hire additional headcount or just negotiate some of your priorities, all of these are negotiations. And so sometimes it's about kind of reframing the ask from something that sounds like I am asking this for me and my personal gain, to something that really puts the company's needs first and foremost. I mean, to kind of give an example, I think most people would think, oh, well, there's no way to really reframe something like asking for a promotion in a way that, doesn't sound like you're selfishly gunning for yourself. But I think there often is. So you could say something like, for example, okay, like I hear the no there. You ask some clarifying questions, but you can also say things like, okay, I hear you on promotion. One of the reasons that I'm talking about this to you, though, is I'm hearing, other people at our junior level are concerned about what the professional promotion path is at the company. And so I feel like, elevating someone from within the ranks is really going to help show that the company invests in junior staff, and
Love
that
that
there is
reframing.
this promotion path. And then you kind of like are reframing it as you're looking out for the company's interest. You're looking out for team morale. You're not just looking out for yourself. So I think it's both. It's asking questions. It's kind of restating your case in different ways, and also really reading the room and listening for tone, which is something that I think a good negotiator has to do, is kind of listen in to see what's being said, what's not being said, and how can I respond.
Yeah, I love that so much, because we always say, keep in mind what's in it for them. A lot of people start negotiating with, well, I want this and this much because, I don't know, more self-focused reasons. But at the end of the day, a job or a promotion needs to make sense for the company. So I like how you reframe that in what's in it for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we know that women tend to get penalized when we're seen as advocating uniquely on behalf of ourselves. And so it's cognitive labor, it's emotional labor, but we have to do the work to kind of think about how do we position this in a way that helps diffuse some of those penalties that we know are out there.
So before this call, you had shared that there are 2 very high leverage ways that you like to coach your clients on to stop fearing negotiations. Can you share a bit more about that?
Yeah. I think that there are 2 really simple, easy things that everyone can do to get better at negotiations. And I think this is particularly helpful for those who consider themselves a people pleaser or are, nervous and shy about negotiation. The very first one is practice saying no and hearing no. So, the month of November, I took this from one of my business school professors who I love. She often does a no challenge in November. And so I've taken that on as well. Like, use the month of November every day to just find something to say no to. And you can start with really small stakes, like someone asks you, do you want to add on this thing to your order? And you're like, no, thank you, right? Just very matter of fact. But you can build up the stakes progressively over the course of a month. And that really, I think, helps people get comfortable holding that productive tension.
Yeah.
And that helps you then when the stakes are bigger. So you want to make some asks so that you're hearing no, and you want to practice saying no so that you're not saying yes to everything, including the things you don't want. So I think that's number one high leverage tip. The second high leverage tip that I have is managing your tone. So one thing that I think is particularly useful for women that we have heard from research is when you inject warmth into your tone, it lands differently. And this is important whether you're doing a salary negotiation. It's also super impactful just in terms of everyday executive presence on the job. Adding that bit of warmth can take something that might sound like an aggressive ask and turn it into something that sounds approachable or likable and doable. So I think this is one where, I love just managing your tone. And you can do this really easily by Tyra Banks, I think it was, sort of encouraged people to smile with your eyes as a model. I encourage people to smile with your voice, right? So you can smile with your voice to help bring the warmth into your tone. And that makes the difference between, like, if you're in a negotiation, saying something like, I need to consider how that's going to work for me, lands very harsh and a little bit aggressive. When you smile with your voice, you can say the same thing. I need to consider how that's going to work for me. And it lands very differently. So just managing your tone and practicing smiling with your voice, very high leverage for women.
This is so great. I have so many thoughts. One is I'm going to borrow the no challenge November. I'm already picturing the LinkedIn
Excited
post.
for all the no's that you're going to be saying.
All the no's.
Hey, everyone, let's do a no challenge November. And I remember hearing about it I think a lot of negotiation courses do this. And many students experience that it ends up being really hard getting a no from other people as well. I think the challenge actually looks a bit different, the one that I've heard, which is go and ask for things until you hear a no. And I've heard of people who thought they were going to get a no, right away, but then they kept asking and asking. People kept giving them the things they wanted. And what is happening? Has it always been this easy to get things? I thought this whole time, I was going to get no's left and right. So
I feel like that's a win, though, too, right? Because when you find that getting a no is actually a lot harder than you feared, I feel like it can free up a lot of people to ask for the things they were afraid of hearing the no around.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm thinking about if I was to do this no challenge, which I want to challenge myself to do this month as well.
Saying no or hearing no?
Well, both. But I was thinking about saying no because it's very hard for me to say no.
Yes.
As that people pleaser, you always want to establish harmony for everybody around and make sure that everyone is well off. What that often results in, though, is it comes sometimes at my own expense. I'm willing to be overly generous to try to accommodate, right? So when if I'm saying no, once I say no, stopping it there. And I was reminded of, Shawna, are you a fan of Friends? Did you watch Friends growing up?
Show.
I did.
So I'm reminded of, so Chandler, he was going on dates with this one woman, but he wasn't feeling the vibe and he didn't want to keep hanging out. So after every date at the end, he said, well, that was a lot of fun. we should do this again sometime. And he would say that every time, and it kept resulting in dates. And so for my challenge,
Help but ask for another date because he didn't know how to end it.
yeah. And so I think for the no challenge here is for me to stop it at, that was a great time. I'm not saying, not in the context of dating, but just whatever the thing that I'm saying no to resist the urge to further accommodate after I have said the no.
Yeah. Also, I feel like in many Asian cultures, you just do not straight up say no, right? Is that true for Koreans?
Yeah, in Korea, Japan especially, you saying the word no is
It's too aggressive. right?
very, very intense. You say no in a roundabout way, like you say, "Excuse me," or it's, it's you
Yeah.
never say directly no. It's
Yeah.
very rare in our cultures.
I learned that from Alex. The way you say no, you say I'm good. If someone's like, "Would you like more food?" You're like, "I'm good." I think someone was asking me, like, "Would you like more food?" I'm like, "I'm good." They're like, "Oh, you want more?" And they kept giving me more. I'm like, "Oh wow, what have I done?"
It's like Chandler and the dates. Like you just keep getting more.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I want to circle back to your second point, which is smiling with your voice. I love that so much. And we talk about this example of people saying, "Can you put that in writing?" Which feels a bit aggressive in and of itself. Like when they ask, especially recruiters, that you get an offer and you're like, "Can you put that in writing?" And I think we tell people not to say that because it feels as if you're not trusting the other party. And at the end of the day, you can put it in writing for them if you need to. Not that it will really matter. But yeah, there are a lot of little things, ways in which we say things or communicate, phrase them, or deliver them in our voice and demeanor where it might hurt your negotiations. And that's why people need coaches and negotiation consultants. Awesome.
Absolutely. I think anytime you can have a consultant or an agent or what have you on your side, so much the better, especially if you feel underconfident going into a negotiation. I think it makes all the difference to have someone at your side.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the points you had mentioned as we were preparing for this is flexibility is not a bonus payment. Would you want to talk more about that?
I work with mostly women with children. They've got big jobs, often executive jobs, but they're also managing families. And if I had $1 for every time someone said to me, "You know what, I'm willing to take a big pay cut to get that remote role," or, insert your flexibility here to have, 3 days at home or to have no travel. Like, I think the thing that a lot of people go to with respect to flexibility is, I'm willing to trade off on salary so that I can have flexibility. And I don't know what your experience is on this. I think sometimes there are trade-offs to be made, but my experience both on the hiring side and on the coaching side is that when you've got your top candidate in front of you, you're not kind of thinking about, well, you know what, she wants, 2 days at home, maybe I should take her salary down. You're thinking, I've got an amazing candidate here. What does she need to be able to do her best work? Let me try to give that to her, right? And so I think, I think women are just often too quick to say, I'm going to trade off salary. And so one thing I like to encourage women to think about is, look, instead of thinking that someone is going to take away from you in order for you to get the flexibility that you want and need, this can truly be a win-win where you get what you need in terms of flexibility in order to do your best work and deliver the most value and impact for the company. And who doesn't want to pay for that, right? That's what we all want.
Yeah. Yeah, I fully agree with that, especially for our audience, the types of people we work with and you work with. I'm sure there are jobs where they're trying to hire for, whoever accepts the lowest amount. But more often, especially in tech and high skilled roles, they're not trying to squeeze in every penny out of your salary. They want the right person for the job. And the other piece is that this is why we tell people to only start really negotiating and making demands after they receive an offer, ideally a written offer, because that's when you know you're the preferred candidate for sure. And at that point, the company has aligned leadership, hiring manager, maybe recruiter, or whatever, whoever is involved in the hiring committee. They love you more than anyone else. And even if they wouldn't normally be open to whatever demands you have, like a couple days from home, now that you are the preferred candidate, you can ask and you're more likely to get what you want. So it's also strategic when you ask as well.
100%. And I've experienced this in the course of my own career at different points when I knew I was the top candidate and but I needed some flexibility. At one point, I was based here in Paris, but I was going to be working for a mostly London-based team. And so, I knew I was the top candidate. I knew they had some reticence about me potentially being mostly virtual. And so then it just became a discussion around how do we make this work, both for me, for my new team, for you as my leaders to have full confidence. And I kind of built out a business case for how I could do and excel at the job, even if I was only on the ground in London 1 week out of the month. And that turned out to be an amazing professional experience. But that wouldn't have happened if I had said, okay, I'm only going to look at jobs that will, say in the job description that they're willing to do this for me.
I really like, Shawna, in the ask, let's say, about wanting more flexibility at the expense of compensation. First, you reframe it as, if I get this flexibility, it will be more valuable to the company, right? As opposed to, I'm making an ask and I'm willing to give something away for it. The other thing, too, is you essentially are not having an assumption that the company thinks that the trade-off is flexibility and pay. You're guiding your clients and not having assumptions as to what you think the company's priority is, right? Also, as people pleasers, we do is that we preemptively give away a concession when it wasn't even asked for. And that was something that I, over time, have had to coach myself on. So this is something as a people pleaser that I've had to combat against, is to not preemptively give away a concession when it wasn't even asked for. Yes. So you have the first ask, just be the ask, right? There's still a lot of growth in that area, right? But is to have the first ask actually just be an ask, not have the first ask be an ask and I'm willing to give something away.
Yeah,
when it hasn't even
against yourself.
Exactly. I really like that when it comes to the flexibility versus pay dilemma, to not have the initial ask be packaged with a I'm willing to take a pay cut.
Yeah. And Goethe, just to come back to the phrase that you just used, I think that we do so much of that, especially if we're kind of self-aware people. We tend to negotiate against ourselves and think about, all right, well, what can I give up here? Like, will they accept this? Well, what else can I do to make this better for other people? And I think that's something that it really helps us all to unlearn. I like to say, if you can change one sentence in your mind, shift it from, instead of asking yourself, what can I do to make things better for other people, whether it's make this easier for my team who are overstretched, or my boss who needs this ahead of deadline, or my spouse at home potentially I'm picking up a lot of slack. Ask yourself instead, what do I need to make my highest contribution in this area?
Yeah.
And I think that really helps us land in a space of healthy entitlement. I think women often get called selfish for negotiating. And I've noticed it's binary. You either get called selfish or selfless, but we don't really have a word for what sits in between. I think about what's that middle, that healthy sense of entitlement where you're advocating for yourself effectively. You're not negotiating against yourself, but you're also thinking about what you genuinely need to do your best work.
Yeah, this reminds me, one of my earlier jobs, I was still an immigrant. I'm American now. Thank you, Alex. But I was still an immigrant. I felt like I had no rights in the workplace, not because of my status, but it's harder to find a job. You need sponsorship, different culture. I don't have enough connections. If they don't like me, they could find a way to kick me out of the country. I don't know. I was very like, I can't. And I remember I had a coworker I had a very tough manager, and she told the manager, oh, if I work late at night, I will just make a lot of mistakes. So I'll just be very productive during the day. And in my head, it was not even in the realm of possibilities for me to say something like that. I'm like, okay, well, then they'll fire you and they'll get someone else. But then now looking back, I don't think I've told you this, but it makes sense. They were not going to fire her. She's already there. She does good work, and they will probably accommodate her hours. And I had another coworker, same team. She's like, at 7 p.m. I have Pilates, so I can't work during that time. And the manager accommodated her. And it was so completely out of my realm of possibilities back then, especially because it was a tough manager. And like I said, I was like still on a student visa. But I observed that even with this tough manager, she accommodated them. And I realized actually, at the end of the day, she cared about the work that you do and getting the work done, as opposed to do you do it at 7 p.m. or not. That was one way in which it changed the way I think about making asks.
I love that. Yeah. I think it's a great illustration of your sort of add the because to the sentence. So they were like, I need to do this, not just because I'm like slacking off on work, but because I have a commitment outside of work.
Yeah.
And so, Shawna, as we wrap up here, what is one final or very important takeaway that you would like our listen to come away with from this episode?
I'm thinking about how to narrow it down to one.
More than one.
Yeah.
Please.
Okay. I'm going to give you two things that I think are really important. We've talked a lot about the importance of negotiation and how to start saying no. And I really hope that people reflect on that, not just in the workplace, but also in their home and personal life. Because so often we get oversubscribed to things outside of work as well. If you're a parent, you're working a second job as well. And so being able to negotiate at home for what you need to do your best in your two roles as a parent and in the workplace, I think is incredibly important. So I like to remind people everything that we talk about in terms of negotiation applies at home as well as in the professional sphere. I think the second thing that I hope everyone takes away is that you're actually more capable as a negotiator than you might think. You know, we don't give ourselves credit for all those little conversations that we have when we're negotiating the nose at the store who's telling us we can't do this, or getting your suitcase on the airplane. We don't give ourselves credit for those conversations. And I think that I like to say, especially for those in the audience who are parents, if you've ever had an interaction with a toddler, you've already faced the world's toughest negotiation. And if you've even sat on an airplane with a toddler, like, you know, these kids are tough, right? So if you can handle a toddler, you can handle a tough negotiation because those kids mean business. So we're all a lot more capable than we think. We have more skills than we think. And I just encourage people to go out and put those into practice.
I love that. Yeah. And it's all about sort of refining it ultimately. Well, I think we can wrap up here. Thank you so much for coming to our podcast. We'll let you know if we're ever in Paris. You're in Paris?
I am right in Paris. Yes.
Nice.
Awesome. And if people want to learn more about you, Shawna, how do they do that? Do you have a website, or can they find you on LinkedIn?
Yes. So the two best places to find me, my website, www.thementaloffload.com. I also have a podcast called the Mental Offload Podcast, and I'm active on LinkedIn, Shawna Samuel is the name. So look forward to meeting so many future executives and women in the professional sphere. Thank you so much for this conversation and for having me. I love getting to kind of geek out on all things negotiation with the two of you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shawna.
It was our pleasure entirely. Okay.
And I hope I get to see you in Paris.
Yes.
Yes, and if
Yes.
you're ever in San Francisco, let us know.
Thank you so much.